The rope snapped taut around Evangeline Rosewood's neck as Sheriff Cole Maverick's Colt .45 discharged into the air, shattering the morning silence of Dustfall Creek. The crowd of 50 townsfolk gasped as Cole's bullets severed the hangman's noose with impossible precision, sending Evangeline crashing onto the gallows platform instead of dangling lifeless in the wind. "Step away from the woman, Jeremiah," Cole's voice thundered across the town square, his smoking revolver now trained on Judge Jeremiah Crenshaw, whose weathered face contorted with rage beneath his black hood. Evangeline gasped for air, her emerald eyes wide with shock as she clawed at the loosened rope around her throat. Her raven hair cascaded over her torn white dress, the same dress she'd worn too. A Sunday service just 3 days before they'd accused her of poisoning old Bartholomew Kettleton. Crenshaw snarled, his gnarled hand reaching for the backup rope. "The tribunal has spoken. This witch dies today." But Cole was already moving, his spurs jingling as he vaulted onto the platform in one fluid motion. His steel-blue eyes locked with Evangeline's terrified gaze. Something electric passed between them. Something that had been building for months. Whenever their paths crossed at the general store or during his routine patrols, past her modest cabin. "The only witch here is you, Crenshaw, bewitching these good people with lies and fear," Cole growled, positioning himself between Evangeline and the bloodthirsty crowd. His broad shoulders strained against his leather vest as he helped her to her feet, feeling the tremor in her delicate hands. Evangeline's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Why? Why are you saving me?" Cole's jaw tightened as he scanned the hostile faces below. Mayor Cornelius Blackthorne pushed through the crowd. His silk vest stretched over his corpulent frame, purple with indignation. "Sheriff Maverick, you're interfering with justice," Blackthorne bellowed. "This woman confessed to witchcraft. She confessed under torture," Cole shot back, his free hand never leaving his holster. "I've seen the bruises on her wrists, the burns on her arms. What kind of justice uses hot irons to extract truth?" The crowd murmured uneasily. Some folks shuffled their feet, doubt creeping into their bloodlust. But others, led by the blacksmith Mordecai Grimm and his twin sons, pressed forward with makeshift weapons. "She cursed my livestock," shouted Verity Ashford, the baker's widow. "My chicken stopped laying after she walked past my fence." "Coincidence?" Cole declared, his voice carrying the authority that had kept Dustfall Creek relatively peaceful for 3 years. "Bartholomew Kettleton died of consumption, plain and simple." Doc Hartwell confirmed it before Crenshaw ran him out. "Of town." Evangeline found her voice, stronger now. "I never hurt anyone. I only gathered herbs for healing, tended to sick animals. Is kindness now a crime?" Cole felt something shift inside his chest, a fierce protectiveness he'd never experienced. Not even during his cavalry days fighting Apache raiders. This woman, with her healing hands and gentle spirit, represented everything good that men like Crenshaw sought to destroy. "The only crime here," Cole announced, his voice carrying across the square, "is the persecution of an innocent woman by cowards and fools." Crenshaw's eyes blazed with fanatical fury. "If you protect her, Maverick, you'll hang beside her." Cole's smile was cold as winter steel. "Then you'll have to go through me first, you sanctimonious buzzard." The tension stretched like a bowstring. As Cole's hand hovered over his gun, Evangeline pressed closer to his side and he could smell lavender in her hair despite everything she'd endured. In that moment, with death circling like vultures, Cole Maverick made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see if their sheriff would draw iron against his own town in defense. Of a woman they'd condemned as a witch, Cole's fingers brushed his gun grip as Mordecai Grimm raised a pitchfork, its rusted tines gleaming in the harsh morning sun. The blacksmiths, twin sons, Cassius and Brutus, flanked their father with crude clubs, their faces twisted with righteous hatred. "You've gone soft for a pretty face, Sheriff," Mordecai sneered, tobacco juice staining his gray beard. "This witch bewitched you same as she did old Kettleton." Evangeline's hand found Cole's arm, and despite the circumstances, warmth spread through his chest at her touch. She stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly, despite the rope burns marking her throat. If speaking against injustice makes me a witch, she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that had always drawn Cole to linger outside her cabin during evening patrols, then perhaps this town needs more witches and fewer cowards who hide behind mob rule. Judge Crenshaw's face purpled. Blasphemy. Seize them both. But as the crowd surged forward, something unexpected happened. Ophelia Nightingale, the town's elderly seamstress, stepped between the mob and the gallows platform. Her silver hair caught the light like spun moonbeams, and her walking stick struck the ground with authority. "Hold your horses, you fools," Ophelia declared, her sharp eyes sweeping the crowd. "Ass! I've lived in Dustfall Creek for 70 years, and I've never seen such shameful behavior. Evangeline Rosewood saved my grandson from fever last winter with her herb knowledge. If she's a witch, then I'm the devil himself." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as more voices joined Ophelia's protest. Doc Hartwell's replacement, a young physician named Lysander Cross, pushed through the throng. "The medical evidence doesn't support poisoning," Dr. Cross announced, clutching his leather satchel. Bartholomew Kettleton's symptoms were consistent with advanced consumption. "I examined the body before certain parties had it hastily buried." Cole felt the tide beginning to turn, but Crenshaw wasn't finished. The corrupt judge pulled a derringer from his robes, pointing it directly at Evangeline's heart. "Enough. The witch dies now, and anyone protecting her joins her in hell." Time slowed to molasses. Cole saw the judge's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Evangeline's eyes widen with terror, saw his own hand moving with practiced precision. His Colt cleared leather in a blur of motion, the report echoing off the surrounding buildings as Crenshaw's derringer spun from his shattered hand. The judge screamed, clutching his bloody fingers as Cole's smoking barrel tracked toward Mayor Blackthorne, who'd been reaching for his own hidden weapon. "Next man who moves wrong gets a permanent case of lead poisoning," Cole growled, his voice deadly calm. "This farce ends now." In the stunned silence that followed, Evangeline stepped closer to Cole, her emerald eyes shining with something beyond gratitude. "You risked everything for me," she whispered. "Why?" Cole's steel-blue gaze softened as he looked down at her upturned face. The answer came from somewhere deep in his soul, a truth he'd been fighting for months. "Because you're worth risking." "Everything for," he said simply. "Because this town, this whole world is darker without your light in it." The crowd watched in amazement as their tough-as-nails sheriff's expression transformed, revealing a tenderness none had suspected existed beneath his weathered exterior. Evangeline's hand rose to touch his stubbled cheek. "Cole Maverick. Beautiful, impossible man. Do you realize what you've done? They'll never forgive you for standing with me." "Then we'll face whatever comes together," Cole replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You'll have a broken-down lawman who's probably lost his job protecting you." Before she could answer, old Ophelia's cackle cut through the tension. "I'll be hornswoggled. Are you two going to stand there making cow eyes at each other all day, or are you going to do something about this mess?" The crowd began to disperse, some ashamed, others muttering threats. But Cole only had eyes for the woman whose life he'd just saved, the woman who was already stealing his heart with her courage and grace. "There's only one way to protect you from men like Crenshaw," Cole said, holstering his smoking Colt as the crowd began to thin. His calloused hands framed Evangeline's face gently, thumb tracing the red marks on her throat. "Marry me, Evangeline. Right here, right now." Her breath caught in her throat, emerald eyes searching his weathered features for any sign of jest. "Cole, you don't have to. This isn't duty talking," he interrupted, his voice roughened by emotion he'd kept buried for years. "I've been half in love with you since the day you nursed that injured hawk back to health behind Milford's stable. Watching you heal creatures others would abandon, seeing your kindness despite how this town has treated you. You're the finest woman I've ever known." Judge Crenshaw, still clutching his wounded hand, snarled from the gallows steps. "You cannot marry a condemned witch. I forbid it." Cole's laugh was harsh as desert wind. "You're no longer in any position to forbid anything, Jeremiah. Mayor Blackthorne, as the highest remaining civil authority, you can perform the ceremony." Blackthorne's jowls quivered with indignation. I will not sanction this mockery. The woman is a murderess. The woman is innocent, declared a new voice from the crowd's edge. All heads turned as Captain Theron Ashworth dismounted from his dust-covered horse. His cavalry uniform travel-stained but bearing the unmistakable authority of federal jurisdiction. I've ridden hard from the territorial capital with new evidence. Cole's hand instinctively moved to his gun, unsure if this development boded well or ill. Captain Ashworth had been his commanding officer during their Apache campaigns, and the man's arrival seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Captain Cole acknowledged with a curt nod. What evidence? Leather pulled a leather document case from his saddlebags, his piercing gray eyes taking in the gallows, the dispersing crowd, and Evangeline's rope-burned throat with military precision. Evidence that clears Miss Rosewood completely and implicates certain prominent citizens in a conspiracy to steal her property. The remaining townspeople pressed closer as Ashworth unfolded official papers. Bartholomew Kettleton didn't die of consumption or poison. He died of a weak heart, as confirmed by the territorial physician who examined his exhumed remains. More importantly, he left a sealed confession with the territorial marshal before his death. Evangeline swayed against Cole, overwhelmed by this sudden reversal of fortune. His strong arm encircled her waist, steadying her as Ashworth continued. Kettleton confessed to accepting bribes from parties seeking to acquire Miss Rosewood's property, which sits atop a significant silver vein recently discovered by territorial surveyors. When guilt overcame him and he threatened to expose the conspiracy, he began receiving death threats. Mayor Blackthorn's face had gone ashen. That's impossible. There's no silver on the Rosewood claim. On the contrary, Ashworth smiled grimly, producing a geological survey map. The vein runs directly beneath Miss Rosewood's cabin and extends onto the adjacent property recently purchased by Judge Crenshaw and yourself, Mayor, at suspiciously low prices from motivated sellers. The pieces clicked into place in Cole's mind like bullets sliding into a cylinder. You orchestrated this whole witch trial to steal her land. Kettleton's guilt aided him, Ashworth continued. His final confession names Crenshaw and Blackthorn as his co-conspirators, along with Mordecai Grimm, who was promised the smithing contract for the future mining operation. Crenshaw, despite his wounded hand, made a desperate lunge for his fallen derringer. Cole's boot pinned the weapon as Ashworth drew his service revolver. Jeremiah Crenshaw, Cornelius Blackthorn, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and corruption of justice, Ashworth announced. Federal marshals are already seizing your assets and surveying the stolen properties. Evangeline looked up at Cole with wonder and growing love. My cabin never knew. Doesn't matter, Cole said fiercely. Silver or no silver, you're worth more to me than all the treasure in the territory. He turned to Captain Ashworth. Can you perform a wedding ceremony? Ashworth grinned, the expression transforming his stern features. With pleasure, Sheriff, though I suggest we make it official at the church. This lady deserves better than Gallows vows. Within the hour, Dustfall Creek's small wooden church filled with an unlikely congregation. Word had spread through the town like wildfire that their sheriff was marrying the woman they'd tried to hang. And curiosity drew even the most reluctant witnesses. Evangeline had changed from her torn dress into a simple blue gown borrowed from Ophelia Nightingale, who'd also provided a delicate lace veil that had belonged to her late daughter. Cole stood at the altar in his best suit. Hastily retrieved from his boarding house, his usually unruly hair combed back, and his boots polished to mirror brightness, Captain Ashworth had agreed to officiate, using his military authority to perform the ceremony. While federal marshals escorted the arrested conspirators to a secure location, Dr. Lysander Cross stepped forward as Evangeline's appointed guardian, since she had no living family. Do you, Evangeline Rosewood, take this man freely and without coercion? He asked formally, ensuring no one could later claim the marriage was invalid. Evangeline's voice rang clear as mountain water. I do, freely and gladly. When Cole slipped his grandmother's silver ring onto her finger, the only thing of value he possessed, his hands trembled slightly. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and love you until my dying breath, he vowed, his steel blue eyes never leaving her face. "And I promise to stand beside you through whatever storms may come," Evangeline replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved more than my life today, Cole Maverick. You saved my soul." As Ashworth pronounced them husband and wife, Cole's kiss was tender yet possessive, claiming her as his own before God and the assembled townsfolk. Cheers erupted from unexpected quarters, Ophelia, Dr. Cross, and even some of the townspeople who'd begun to question the days earlier. Madness. But their celebration was short-lived. As the couple turned to face their audience, Mordecai Grimm burst through the church doors, his twin sons flanking him with loaded shotguns. "This ain't over," Mordecai roared, his eyes wild with desperate fury. "That silver belongs to honest folks, not some witch and her lapdog sheriff." Cole pushed Evangeline behind the altar as he drew his Colt in one smooth motion. "Stand down, Mordecai. Don't make this worse for yourself." "Worse?" Mordecai laughed bitterly. "They're going to hang me anyway when they find out how deep this goes. Might as well take you two with me." Cassius Grimm raised his shotgun toward Evangeline, but Cole was faster. His bullet took the younger man in the shoulder, spinning him away from his weapon. Brutus hesitated, giving Captain Ashworth time to draw and fire, disabling the second son without killing him. Mordecai, seeing his boys down, let out a roar of rage and charged straight at Cole with a knife pulled from his boot. The two men crashed into the church pews, rolling and grappling as the congregation screamed and scattered. Cole was younger and faster, but Mordecai had the desperation of a cornered animal. The blacksmith's blade sliced across Cole's ribs, drawing blood and a grunt of pain. Evangeline cried out, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the altar. As Mordecai raised the knife for a killing blow, Evangeline brought the candlestick down hard on his wrist. The knife clattered away as Cole landed a devastating uppercut that sent the blacksmith crashing unconscious against the church wall. Breathing heavily, Cole struggled to his feet, one hand pressed against his bleeding side. Evangeline was at his side instantly, her healer's instincts taking over as she examined the wound. "It's not deep," she murmured, tearing strips from her borrowed veil to bind the cut. "But we need to get you to the doctor. First things first," Cole said, pulling her close despite his injury. "Are you all right, Mrs. Maverick?" The name sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm perfect, husband, though. Our wedding day certainly won't be forgotten any time soon." Captain Ashworth, supervising the arrest of the Grimm men, shook his head in amazement. "Cole, you always did attract trouble like honey draws flies." "At least now I have someone worth fighting for," Cole replied, gazing down at his new wife with undisguised adoration. 3 days after their tumultuous wedding, Cole and Evangeline took refuge in a secluded cabin nestled in Whispering Pine Canyon, 20 miles from Dustfall Creek. Captain Ashworth had insisted they leave town while federal investigators completed their work, ostensibly for their safety, but Cole suspected his former commander understood newlyweds needed time alone together. Cabin belonged to Cole's late mentor, Marshal Isaiah Thornfield, who taught him everything about frontier justice before a bullet from a cattle rustler ended his career. Evangeline stood on the covered porch, watching her husband split firewood with methodical precision, his wounded side now properly bandaged but still tender. "You don't have to prove your strength to me," she called softly, setting down the herbal tea she'd been brewing. "I know what kind of man I married." Cole buried the axe in the chopping block and turned to her, sweat glistening on his broad chest beneath his open shirt. "What kind is that?" She moved to him slowly, her bare feet silent on the weathered porch boards. "The kind who risks everything for what he believes in. The kind who sees past surfaces to the truth beneath." Her fingers traced the bandage wrapped around his ribs. "The kind who makes me feel safe for the first time in years." Cole's calloused hands cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Evangeline, I need you to know what happened in that church. What I said during our vows, none of it was spoken in the heat of the moment. I've been watching you, wanting you for months. Watching me." Her emerald eyes sparkled with mischief. "Sheriff Maverick, have you been stalking me?" His chuckle rumbled deep in his chest. "Maybe a little. Your cabin sits on my patrol route, and I found myself taking that route more often than necessary, especially on evenings when you'd sit on your porch reading by lamplight." whispered, rising on her toes to brush her lips against his jaw. I felt your eyes on me. Sometimes I'd choose my evening reading spot hoping you'd ride by. The admission sent heat coursing through Cole's veins. Minx, here I thought I was being subtle. About as subtle as a thunderstorm, Evangeline laughed, the sound like silver bells in the mountain air. But I liked it. After so many years of being treated like a pariah, having someone look at me with desire instead of suspicion was ... intoxicating. Cole swept her into his arms, mindful of his injury, carrying her toward the cabin's interior. Then let me intoxicate you properly, wife. The cabin's single room was rustic, but comfortable, dominated by a large stone fireplace and a bed covered in warm quilts. Evangeline had already transformed the space with small touches, wildflowers in mason jars, herbs hanging from the rafters, too dry, and the soft glow of candles she'd made from rendered animal fat and pressed flower petals, as Cole set her down gently beside the bed. She began unbuttoning his shirt with trembling fingers. I've never... that is, I don't know how to... We have all the time in the world, Cole murmured against her temple, his hands gentle as they unlaced her bodice. No rush, no expectations. It's just us discovering each other. Outside their sanctuary, a summer storm began to build, thunder rolling across the canyon walls like distant drums. Rain started pattering on the roof as Cole and Evangeline came together with the desperate tenderness of two souls who'd found their perfect match against all odds. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, Evangeline traced lazy patterns on Cole's chest while the storm raged outside. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. It's giving up your position, your reputation, everything you'd built in Dustfall Creek? Cole's arms tightened around her. Never. A badge is just metal, darling. Your flesh and blood and the other half of my soul. I'd rather be a wanted man with you than a respected sheriff without you. What if we can't go back? What if they never accept us? And we'll make our own place somewhere else, he said fiercely. Build our own life, raise our own family, create our own little piece of heaven. Thunder crashed overhead as if the sky itself was sealing their promise. A week later, Cole and Evangeline returned to Dustfall Creek to find the town transformed. Federal marshals had arrested 12 conspirators in the land fraud scheme, including 3 members of the town council and the owner of the general store. Captain Ashworth waited for them at the sheriff's office, his expression unreadable. The territorial governor wants to see you both, Ashworth announced without preamble. Seems your little rebellion has caught the attention of some very important people. Cole's hand instinctively found his gun belt, though he'd turned in his badge before leaving town. Are we under arrest? On the contrary, Ashworth smiled. Governor Meredith Clearwater is quite impressed with how you handled the situation. She's offering you the position of territorial marshal, with jurisdiction over 3 counties. Evangeline gasped, her hand tightening on Cole's arm. That's a significant promotion. With significant responsibilities, Cole replied carefully. What's the catch, Captain? Ashworth's expression grew serious. The catch is that corruption runs deeper than we initially thought. What happened here in Dustfall Creek is happening in towns across the territory. Mining companies, cattle barons, railroad executives there, all using intimidation, false accusations, and manufactured legal proceedings to steal land from smallholders. Cole felt Evangeline shiver beside him. You want us to be bait? I want you to be justice, Ashworth corrected. A team that can't be bought, threatened, or intimidated. Marshall and his wife who've already proven they'll stand up to corruption, no matter the cost. Before Cole could respond, the office door burst open. Ophelia Nightingale swept in, followed by Dr. Cross and a dozen other townspeople who'd supported them during the crisis. Sheriff Maverick, Ophelia declared, using his old title, despite his resignation. We've come to apologize and to ask you to stay. Jeremiah Kettleton, Bartholomew's nephew and newly arrived from Denver, stepped forward. The territorial investigation uncovered my uncle's full confession. He named you, Mrs. Maverick, as the only person who showed him genuine kindness during his final illness, left specific instructions that his property should go to you if anything happened to him. Evangeline's eyes filled with tears. I don't want his property. I just wanted to help him feel less alone. Which is exactly why he wanted you to have it, Kettleton replied. The silver mine extends under his land too. You're now one of the wealthiest women in the territory. Cole saw the irony immediately. The woman they'd tried to hang for being a penniless, which was now rich enough to buy and sell most of the men who'd condemned her. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. Evangeline looked around the room, at the faces of people who'd watched her nearly hang, then stood by silently as corruption was exposed. Some showed genuine remorse, others merely opportunistic friendliness, now that her circumstances had changed. I want to help, she said finally, but not here. These people chose to believe lies about me because it was easier than seeking truth. They need to learn that actions have consequences. Cross stepped forward. Mrs. Maverick, many of us were caught up in fear and mob mentality. We're not proud of it, but we're hoping for a chance to make amends. And make amends by being better, Evangeline replied with quiet dignity. Don't wait for someone else to stand up for the innocent. Don't let fear override your conscience. And never, ever let men like Crenshaw convince you that kindness is witchcraft. Cole felt pride swell in his chest at his wife's gracious but firm response. She'd found the perfect balance between forgiveness and accountability. We'll take the marshal position, Cole announced, surprising even himself with the decision. But we won't be based here. The territorial capital needs experienced lawmen, and frankly, Dustfall Creek needs time to rebuild its character without us as a reminder of its shame. Ashworth nodded approvingly. The governor will be pleased. When can you start? Cole looked down at Evangeline, seeing understanding and support in her emerald eyes. Give us 2 weeks to settle our affairs and find a suitable house in the capital. Make it 3 weeks, Evangeline added with a mysterious smile. I have some mining contracts to negotiate. 1 year later, Territorial Marshal Cole Maverick stood on the steps of the Capitol building in Helena. Watching his wife address a crowd of journalists and territorial officials, Evangeline had used her mining wealth to establish the Frontier Justice Foundation, providing legal defense for small landholders facing suspicious legal challenges across Montana territory. Corruption thrives in darkness, she declared, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. But when good people shine light on injustice, evil cannot hide. Cole smiled, remembering the frightened woman he'd saved from the gallows. That woman had transformed into a formidable force for justice, using her intelligence, resources, and hard-won wisdom to protect others from the persecution she'd endured. Captain Ashworth approached, now wearing the insignia of Territorial Commander. Impressive turnout for the Foundation's anniversary celebration. The governor's considering making Frontier Legal Defense a permanent territorial service. Evangeline would love that, Cole replied, never taking his eyes off his wife. She believes everyone deserves a fair trial, not mob justice. Speaking of which, Ashworth handed Cole a telegram. Update from Dustfall Creek. They've elected a new mayor and hired a new sheriff. The town's actually thriving since they cleaned house. Cole scanned the message, noting that several of their former supporters had written personally, expressing gratitude for the lesson and courage they'd provided. Good for them. Growth requires admitting mistakes. The crowd began to disperse as Evangeline finished her speech. But she remained surrounded by reporters and officials, eager to discuss legal reforms. Cole waited patiently, content to watch her navigate the political waters with the same grace she'd shown facing a lynch mob. Dr. Lysander Cross appeared at Cole's elbow. Having relocated to Helena to serve as the Foundation's medical advisor, she's remarkable, Marshal. The Foundation has overturned 17 fraudulent land seizures this year alone. She's everything I never knew I needed, Cole replied simply. Smart, brave, compassionate, and stubborn enough to keep me honest. The last reporter departed. Evangeline finally made her way to Cole's side, slipping her hand into his with practiced ease. How did I do, husband? Like you were born to it, he answered, raising her hand to brush his lips across her knuckles. Oh, I have news that might interest you more than territorial politics. Her eyebrows arched with curiosity. Oh, Cole pulled a letter from his vest pocket, his expression carefully neutral. Dr. Morrison confirms what we suspected. You're pregnant, Mrs. Maverick. Evangeline's gasp drew the attention of everyone within earshot, but she only had eyes for her husband. Truly, we're going to have a baby? Come spring, apparently, Cole grinned, sweeping her into his arms, despite their public surroundings. Our own little miracle. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks as she peppered his face with kisses. A year ago, I was facing death for crimes I didn't commit. Now I'm married to the most wonderful man alive and carrying his child. How did we get so fortunate? We fought for what was right, Cole said, his voice husky with emotion. We chose love over fear, truth over convenience. The universe has a way of rewarding courage. That evening, in their comfortable home overlooking the capital city, Cole and Evangeline sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Evangeline's head rested on Cole's shoulder, his hand protective over her still flat belly. You ever regret the path that brought us together? She asked softly. Cole's answer came without hesitation. Never. Every hardship, every injustice, every moment of fear led me to you. I'd walk through hell again if it meant finding my way to your heart. Then we're perfectly matched, Evangeline murmured. Because I'd face every gallows in the territory if it meant ending up in your arms. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Cole Maverick held his wife close and marveled at how love had transformed them both. From a cynical lawman and a persecuted healer, they'd become partners in every sense, fighting injustice, building a family, and proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the greatest acts of courage. Their child would grow up in a world where both parents had stared down evil and chosen to stand for what was right, no matter the cost. It was the finest legacy any couple could hope to leave.